Welcome to Research Rank Repeat. My name is Hannah, and I'm joined by my co-host Alyssa.
We are here to delve into this podcast, and we're starting with a new topic. We're looking towards television.
Yes, and specifically animated television.
A great place to be.
Yeah, it really is. And so we thought we would start with Legend of Korra.
And just a little bit of background on our history is that we, earlier this year, had went through and watched all of Avatar together. I had seen it countless times. I couldn't tell you a number. Hannah had seen it when we were children, but she had never watched it all the way through as an adult.
Yeah, I had seen episodes here and there, but I wanted to go through and watch it the entire way through. We probably watched it in about a month.
About a month, maybe a little more.
Pretty quick.
Roughly, yeah.
And then I've seen a couple episodes of Legend of Korra.
I have seen every episode and every season. I watched them when they premiered. I haven't seen it all the way through, I think, since the finale of the show. So there are, a few things here and there that I don't remember, but there's nothing that would surprise me going into this. And so just full disclosure for everything, we are recording this prior to seeing any of the show.
Yes.
Because I wanted to come and I wanted to ask Hannah just a few questions coming into this before we start. And so since you just said that you had seen a few episodes, what I wanted to know is, what do you know about the show? Like, do you know anything about characters? Do you know anything about plot, story? Like, I just want to know what general knowledge you have before we start.
Okay, so basically, I would say I know the bare minimum. I'm aware that Korra is a new avatar.
Okay.
Or maybe not new, but she is the newest avatar.
Okay.
Current. I do know that it's sort of like a, not necessarily like a spin-off, but like a continuation of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
That is correct. It is a continuation.
And I believe Korra is like Aang's granddaughter or daughter. There's some relation there.
I will say nothing on the topic. We will find out as we watch.
Yes, but that is pretty much all I know.
Okay, you don't know any other characters in the show, just that there's Korra.
No, I mean besides I imagine at some point some of the old characters might show up.
Okay.
But besides that, I don't know any characters.
Okay. That's just the basics. I wanted to know where we stood, because I did the same thing when we watched Avatar. I was like, what do you remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you were like, I remember long-haired Zuko and 3 things from one specific episode in the first season. And I'm like, all right, great.
Yeah, and 13-year-old me had a massive crush on long-haired Zuko.
Who didn't?
Specifically, not ponytailed Zuko, long-haired Zuko.
I was actually talking about this at work recently. We were talking about Zuko's hair journey, and we all decided that nobody is into shaved head ponytail Zuko.
I mean, he was also just a giant douchebag.
It's just not a good look.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the next question is kind of open-ended, but are there things that you wish you could have seen in the first, in Avatar, that you didn't get to see, that you would hope could be discovered or explored upon in this show?
That's a good question.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's a little open-ended, so you can...
I always really like seeing a lot of the action sequences. So I'm hoping for a lot of that.
I can tell you there will be action.
There we go.
Lots of bending.
I'm all about the female, warriors, fighters, so I'm pretty excited for...
Korra is buff.
Yeah.
She's a buff chick.
Yeah,
she's great.
I've seen, tons of pictures.
I was gonna say, I'm sure you've seen her, yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
She's quite strong.
And I also, I guess I want to see a good couple villains.
Okay.
My biggest pet peeve in a lot of shows is when they don't take time to develop a villain, and they just kind of throw them in there with no... You don't feel anything.
Right.
You want to get some backstory on villains, so I would kind of hope that... I know not every villain's going to have, a huge backstory, but, a main villain, I want to see, a good arc with them.
Okay. So my next question is there a specific location or a few locations or any of the nations that you want to revisit or explore more from the first show that you liked or you didn't get to see enough of because now will be in the future, so things may have changed in areas or be different.
I think I really enjoy the Fire Nation scenes because I really enjoy the characters that came from the Fire Nation. I think those were examples of like compelling villains.
Mm-hmm.
And Zuko not necessarily a villain. Like at the beginning he was, but he kind of grows into like the anti-hero, I guess.
Right. And then becoming the Fire Lord.
Right. But I guess I'm interested also to see if any of the original characters are still alive then.
Okay, and that leads into my last question, is that let's just say that characters are alive from the show. Who would you
Zuko.
Who would you want to see the most? Who would you want to see and who would you expect to see?
I have to imagine, this breaks my heart, that Uncle Iroh is no longer with us, seeing as it's probably been a while.
I would say that, considering he was already not an elder, but
pretty
older,
old. Yeah.
Chances are he is no longer living.
Yeah. I definitely want to see Katara.
Okay.
I always really enjoyed her progression of fighting skills and waterbending skills.
She has one of the strongest stories in the sense of like her growth, not necessarily character-wise, because his character growth is exceptional, but her mental and physical growth with her bending and the way she's able to use that to better herself, and I always really liked that.
I think I want to see Sokka just for like the humor aspect. Like I think he'd be a funny old man.
Mm-hmm.
I actually really want to see I'm blanking on the name. Zuko's sister.
Azula.
Because I thought Azula was like, in terms of villains, like she's just a great villain.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Great
so I kind of want to see how her and like Zuko's relationship was.
Do you think we will see Aang in a role similar to Roku, or do you think he will not be similar? Like, what do you foresee the Avatar connection to be?
I mean, I would like to think that we'll get to see him in, like, the spirit form. Because, like, Roku was Aang's, like, mentor.
Right.
Even though he wasn't around. So I think I would like to see him kind of, like, mentor Korra. And I do think there's a relation. I'm pretty sure it might be his granddaughter. I don't know.
Okay.
But I would like to see, like, that sort of relationship there. In like, a spirit form. I imagine he would be at least mentioned because the show, it was a big show, not to just mention your main character.
Now, you haven't mentioned Toph, just in general.
Oh my god.
In general. Or what would she have done with her life following, Sozin's comment and all that? Like, where do you think she would have had kids? Do you think she would be married? Like, what do you foresee she would have done?
I completely forgot.
That's okay. I assumed you were not thinking about her because she had not come up once. I just am curious
I don't see her getting married or having kids.
Okay.
I feel like she could have become, and I don't know if she's still alive, she might be. I feel like she definitely could have become like an earthbender, like mentor, and like maybe like trained younger people, because she always like, she wasn't necessarily like the best teacher when she was teaching Aang.
Right.
But I feel like she's just so committed to being an earthbender.
And also metalbender.
Right, because now she can metalbend. Like, that was the coolest thing. That I feel like she probably, like, continued, like, teaching that to other people.
Right.
And it'd be cool to see Korra being trained by, like, Katara or Zuko or, like, some of the people who were in the original. So I don't know. I completely forgot she was a character, though. If the person who voices Toph is listening to this, I apologize.
All right, well, that is all the questions I had, just to get a basis, of what you think, what you know, what you'd like to see, what you expect, and we are going to jump in and start the show. So we will come back when we've watched some of it, and we'll start to share our thoughts.
Catch you on the flip side. I hate my life.
I was gonna say we'll give you some background into the show, but I don't think we'll catch you on the flip side. But all right, see you soon.
Let's just end it.
Alright, we're back on the flip side. What, you didn't like it? You're the one who made that joke.
That was mean.
You made the joke.
I already hated myself enough. You didn't have to make me hate myself more.
Oh, that's fine. So, we're gonna get into some background and history about the Legend of Korra. As we know from watching Avatar, Legend of Korra is a sequel of sorts to Avatar: The Last Airbender. Avatar was created by Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. I believe that's correct. I'm sorry if I butchered your last name. They are also commonly referred to as Bryke, just so you're aware.
Okay.
So, in case you wanted to know that information.
Needed to whip that out somewhere.
Yes. So Avatar ran from 2005 to 2008. 2010, the pre-production of The Legend of Korra was announced. And then Korra ended up airing from 2012 to 2014. So a show that ended up being 4 books only ran for about 3 years.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was looking up, like, the season 1, just trying to get some background stuff, that I figured it'd be 4 years, like, 1 a season.
We will talk about more production focused on each season as we get to them, because there is some conflict between the creators and Nickelodeon that will become apparent as we go. But I don't want to cover that until we get to those specific books. So, book 1, which is titled Air, was originally supposed to be a 12-episode miniseries. And the creators actually, I found this out today when I was looking up information, the creators wanted to do a follow-up animated movie to Avatar. Basically just be about what happened to them post-show.
Was this before or after the live action?
Well, let's see. The live action movie came out, I think, in 2009 or 10. We were in high school, or maybe you were in middle school, but we went and saw it in theaters.
Yeah.
But unrelated to that, they were not really involved in the live action movie.
It's clear.
Clear by what happened. Maybe we'll talk about that at one point, but
I don't really have a desire to.
Yeah. But so the creators wanted to do a follow-up movie, and Nickelodeon said no. They didn't want that. So that ended up turning into a comic series. I don't know if you know, there's a several-part comic series that follows the adventures of the gang post book 3. I've never read them, but I've heard good things about them. And instead, what happened is Nickelodeon said, give us more Korra. So then they renewed it for book 2 instead.
Okay.
So they were like, give us a full 26 episodes. But this was either after book 1 had finished or while it was in the process of airing. So there was no connect between season 1 and season 2 from the start.
Okay.
So they had made season 1. It was a done thing. And then they said, actually, give us 14 more episodes.
See, that makes sense now, having watched the season 1 finale.
Yes.
Why it felt like the end of a show, like the complete end of a show. So that makes sense knowing that.
The Legend of Korra takes place 70 years after the events of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Republic City is described as what happens if Manhattan was in Asia.
Okay.
Is what the creators are quoted as saying. And it's got like a 1920s kind of a steampunk vibe going on. And another thing that's interesting is how they altered the bending styles. Because in Avatar, each bending had its own inspiration from a form of like martial arts or, Tai Chi, karate, something of the sorts. And what they did in Korra, because it's kind of in a city and it takes place in the future, they decided to kind of modernize and blend the bending styles together. So the 3 main inspirations for bending is mixing Chinese martial arts, mixed martial arts, and tricking. Do you know what tricking is?
I do not.
I didn't either, so I looked it up. And tricking is when you do kicks with flips and tricks from gymnastics and forms of dance such as breakdancing.
Okay.
And I noticed that, especially with the pro bending, that it kind of had like a boxing, kind of like martial arts feel, because it's kind of close and, lots of bobbing and weaving. So the first book changed names several times as well. The original title was Avatar: Legend of Korra.
Okay.
Then it was The Last Airbender: Legend of Korra.
I think it's good that they kept, like, Avatar and Last Airbender out of there, because I think you're trying to distance yourself from that first show to create your own show, and you don't want people to, like, constantly be reminded of that.
Another thing, I cannot confirm that this is true, but Avatar, the movie, came out around when this was in production.
The live action?
Yes, Avatar came out, I believe, in either 2009 or 2010. So I don't know if that had any influence.
Oh, you're talking about Avatar, like,
the Blue People. Yes. The James Cameron's most selling movie until Avengers, and I can't remember if it was Endgame or Infinity War, broke the record. Yes.
So you're saying they might not have wanted to have Avatar in their title because the movie would have just come out like a year before that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. There's nothing that says that, but I just wonder if that was a consideration. Right. Nickelodeon was like, I don't know if we want to have Avatar in the title because of that. So, here's something that you might be interested in hearing about. Nickelodeon was reluctant and concerned to air The Legend of Korra because their fear was that girls will watch boys' shows, but boys won't watch a show about a girl.
I don't understand that, to be honest.
It's ridiculous.
It's super sexist.
It's absolutely ridiculous because they ended up getting a test audience of boys, and they had no issues with Korra as a main character and the protagonist.
I mean, also you have a lot of male side characters in there, and also it's still action sequences. I don't think it matters if it's a male or a female doing the action sequences.
It shouldn't matter,
right?
But executives apparently have to consider these things and are thinking that, oh, we can't have a girl, she's not good enough to be a main character.
I think it'd be safe to say most of Nick's executives were probably white men.
I would imagine, yes. I would imagine. Now, let's talk about Book 1. Okay. Book 1 aired Saturday mornings, and I couldn't get a confirmation on the time that it aired at, but as someone who watched it when it was airing, I think it was maybe 11 a.m., 11 or 11:30.
That's like prime cartoon time, though.
And it worked out for them, because the premiere of the show averaged 4.5 million viewers, which is a lot.
Yeah, and it was Nick's most watched animated series premiere in 3 years.
It was also the #1 kids show and animated program of that time, like of that weekend or that week.
Right.
And the first season or book averaged 3.8 million viewers per episode, which was the highest total for an animated series of the year, which is crazy because you've got the likes of The Simpsons, you've got Family Guy, you know, you have other animated shows, and it was the most watched animated show of 2012.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it had to do, obviously, with the success of Avatar: The Last Airbender. People knowing it was a sequel, obviously, that you already have fans built in. So I think that's helpful to have a fan base, but I also think they probably got a lot of kids who hadn't watched the first one watching this.
I also remember that the first book had a ton of marketing. I remember seeing commercials and ads for it constantly on Nickelodeon and in general.
Right.
So I'm sure that helped as well.
Of course, yeah.
So the show averaged a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes.
There was a 79% on Movie Critics.
And it also was nominated for many awards. Most notably, they were nominated for 7 Annie Awards, 5 Daytime Emmys, and 1 Grace Allen Award, which are pretty big in the animation field.
Right.
And they won 2 Annie Awards, 1 of the Daytime Emmys, and they won the Grace Allen Award.
So for pretty good win record there then. Yeah,
they won for various things, not like specifically. The Grace Allen Award, or Gracie Allen, was for Best Show, but some of the other awards for like production related things.
Okay.
And that's all I have about history.
Before we start though, we will be talking about the show, about plot points that happen. So just a little spoiler alert.
There will be spoilers.
Yeah. If you have not watched all the show yet, maybe wait till you finish to watch this or listen to this. Okay. So I did get a little description from Wikipedia.
Okay.
Most trusted web source out there.
Not if you're in school.
Yeah.
You can't trust Wikipedia
It's the
for
devil.
any source. Yeah. If you even touch it, you will get an F.
Okay, so Season 1, Book 1, Air, follows 17-year-old Korra from the Southern Water Tribe and the successor of Avatar Aang from the preceding series Avatar The Last Airbender, as she travels to the metropolis of Republic City to learn airbending and faces an anti-bender revolutionary group, the Equalists, led by the masked Aman.
Ooh.
Ooh, spooky.
Ooh.
So
Very.
Scary. So the first thing I just wanted to say is I was like kind of interested to see how quickly I would be what am I looking for? Like be able to get invested in the series.
Right.
Because I feel like with Avatar, it took me a couple episodes to really get into it. So going into this, since I already had somewhat of a connection to the past show, I was just interested to see if that would be an instant thing where I fell in love with it, or if I'd have to wait a little bit. We can get into it later on, but it did take me a little bit to get invested in the characters and everything.
It definitely, I remember when I watched it, because I watched it, the premiere as it aired. I was one of those 4.5 million people watching the show, and it was surreal. I remember being surreal where you're, like, you immediately meet Aang and Katara's son, you meet Toph's daughter, like, Aang is dead, Sokka's dead, you're like, oh my god, my characters, where are they? And you're just, like, thrown into it, like, here you go, good luck.
Yeah, I mean, they revealed a lot in the first, like, 5 to 10 minutes. Like, that you knew that Sokka had died, you knew Aang was probably already dead since there was a new Avatar.
He kind of had to be dead. There's no chance he was alive.
You see Katara right away, so you get a lot of questions answered right away, which I think is smart because a lot of people are like waiting for those answers. Some of the stuff you don't find out till later on.
Right.
But yeah, one of the things I noticed about this season is it's very reminiscent of like current events.
Yes.
There's a lot of themes that match up with what's going on right now in the world.
A lot of season 1 is a lot of political issues, police brutality, yep. Oppression.
The other main thing I noticed, and I know you mentioned this, I don't know if you mentioned it in the podcast, but you told me that the music is done by the same team from Avatar.
Yes. Jeremy Zuckerman was the soundtrack designer for Avatar The Last Airbender, and he also worked on Legend of Korra as well.
Which you could tell, like I could notice, because one of my favorite things about Avatar was when they did like the scenes and it had just that music, it just made it so much better. So I noticed that right away, and I was like, I think it's a smart idea to keep the same person going.
I'm glad they brought him back because they were able to keep, like, because there's a lot of similar instruments from Avatar that they use in Korra, but they're able to, like, it gave some of the tracks are a bit jazzy, you know, kind of fits like the 1920s feel, like swing, like old time kind of music, but then there's also the strings and, you know, the like sound like glockenspiel-esque, you know, xylophone sounds.
Yeah, and you talked about this, how they said it was kind of like a New York City feel. They wanted to have that. And that's one of the things like that I think was the most striking, is going from Avatar and then instantly going to this where there's cars all over the place. There's so much industrialization going on that it took me a minute to like realize what was happening.
I would say that if their intention was, which I think it was to make Legend of Korra feel very distinct and different from Avatar, I think they did a good job of that, because Avatar was all about the adventure. You know, they're traveling from location to location, and they generally don't stay in one place for more than an episode or two, except for like Ba Sing Se and in the Fire Nation capital. You spend a little bit more time there, but this whole season takes place in Republic City.
Right. You
get a little bit of the Southern Water Tribe at the very beginning and the very end, but the bulk of the show takes place in one location. So you're in one central localized place, and I think that makes it feel very different.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I do like that they have a lot of different places within the city. But it definitely is different from not seeing them be traveling all the time. They're stuck in one area, and the whole plot and the whole story revolves specifically around the city and events going on inside that city.
I really liked that.
Yeah.
I know that there are people who dislike season 1, or book 1, I should say, because of that, because it's just one location. I remember back in the day on the Avatar subreddit, people, when season or book 2 was announced, people were like, are we going to get to leave the city? Are we going to get to go to new locations? Because people were like, I don't know if I want a second season to take place in one city again.
Right. Yeah, because you worry about it become, like, boring or becoming repetitive and stuff like that. So I can understand that. I personally would like to see them maybe go somewhere else just to get a different feel or a different, like, more plot from that. But other things I noticed is the action sequences I thought were done really well, the fighting sequences.
You can see a definite improvement in animation quality.
Yeah.
It's high def.
Yeah. I think I even said something to you, like, the first episode. I was like, this is so much, like, clearer and, like, crisper than Avatar was.
It's very crisp.
I would like to say that one of the things I love the most about Avatar was the side characters we got. And so going into Legend of Korra, I was, like, really worried about not getting strong side characters. And I will say the first couple episodes, I was like, ooh, I don't know if I'm, like, crazy about these side characters. But for the most part, I really liked all of them by the end. There was a lot of characters that surprised me how much I ended up liking them at the end.
I think it's interesting for this show because Avatar, the majority of the cast were children. Mm-hmm. You know, they were ages 12 to 16. I think Zuko was 16. And there were very few adults. We get Uncle Iroh, you know, and side characters here and there, but the majority of the main cast is children. Mm-hmm. And in Korra, pretty much everyone's an adult.
Yeah.
You know, Korra's 17. I believe Mako and Bolin are 16 through 18, roughly the same as Asami. And then you get Tenzin and Lin, who are people in, like, their 50s.
Right.
You know, and it's kind of interesting to see the different dynamics that they're able to create with this show.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. That's definitely interesting. Going off of characters, I think the one thing that Legend of Korra does really well is creating strong female characters.
Yes.
Well, you got Lin, you've got Korra, you have Asami, but they're all three, like, really strong side female characters, or main characters in the case of Korra. And I think that continued off of Avatar, because I've always felt like Avatar with Toph and with Katara. Yeah, and Azula. Like, they always did strong female characters, which I enjoy.
And it's nice to see Korra is, as a main character, she's not what you would generally see in a lead, like, character. She's almost the complete opposite of Aang. She's super buff. She's cocky. She's, you know, antagonistic. She's kind of a bully at times. You know, she relies on her strength. She's, you know, stubborn. And it's nice to see, like, a character like that.
Yeah. Which I thought one of the reasons that I ended up liking Tenzin a lot is because you got that quiet kind of calmness that Aang used to have. And it's so cool to see that, like, in his son. I also really liked watching Tenzin fight, because I feel like that's what we would have been able to see with Aang, like, 30 years after Avatar. You know, because we never got to see him fight as an adult, obviously.
We did, though.
Well, we did. But not, like, more than, like, snippets, you know what I mean?
More than a 30-second flashback.
Right.
Tenzin almost seems, in his fighting style, more aggressive.
Yeah.
Like, the airbending is a lot more, like, in some of the fights, like, some of the things he does, you see, you know, Aang in him, but some of it, it's very, like, kind of punchy almost, where it's, like, bursts of air, and I'm like, oh. Yeah. It's interesting to see that evolution from him.
Right. And I know one of the things I had mentioned when we talked about, you asked me some questions about kind of what I wanted to see, and one of my main things was, like, a compelling villain.
You specifically said that you wanted a villain backstory.
Mm-hmm. And with Amon, at the beginning, like, he definitely was a striking villain, because he's behind a mask, you don't know who he is, you're making up theories the whole season.
The theory crafting about Amon when this was airing was insane. People were all over the place. I know you had talked about you thought it might be Tarlok.
Yep, and I also thought maybe for a second it could be Asami's dad.
Hiroshi Sato.
Yep, Sato, and I thought maybe, because he was giving me, like, a creepy vibe. So I went through a couple different characters trying to figure it out.
People thought it was Zuko. People thought it was somehow Aang, like an evil spirit Aang. People thought it was Ko the Face Stealer. Do you remember him from season 1? People thought it was Ko the Face Stealer. People thought it was one of Aang's other kids. People were...
I think I said that. Maybe it could be one of Aang's other kids, because you only learn about one of them.
We can keep going with Amon. He was so compelling leading up to the end, and I feel like the payoff wasn't there.
No, the way that they ended his storyline, it just didn't feel right with how they'd been going all season.
I agree, and I think part of the reason it doesn't feel right is because it was supposed to be one solid story.
Right.
The build-up, starting from episode 3, where you find out he can take people's bending away, that made him scary, because it's like, he can take away your power, something that only we saw Aang do at the end of book 3 to Ozai.
And it's someone, unlike Aang, who doesn't have, like, control. Like, Aang wouldn't just take people's powers away who weren't causing an issue. This Amon, he can literally take anyone's powers away.
Right, and his goal is to create equality.
Right.
So his overall, like, what we would assume his overall goal is to literally take away everyone's bending in existence.
Well, because he's the equalist, they want everyone to kind of be on a level playing field.
Right. It's kind of like parallel to The Incredibles with Syndrome.
Syndrome, yeah.
Whereas if everyone's super, no one is kind of deal.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I think he is a compelling villain up until the end.
I would say once we get to the last 2 episodes is where it fizzles out.
Yeah.
Up until when he takes away Lynn's bending.
Yeah.
He's a terrifying, like edge of my seat. The scene, I remember, because you mentioned you thought Tarlok was Amon. A lot of people thought Tarlok was Amon. The scene where Tarlok walks up the stairs and Amon's standing next to him, and then he's bloodbending him, and he's just walking through it. Yeah. And he takes away his bending, and the people were, and I remember I was like, oh my god, I'm like, what is this? Like, who is he?
The other thing, and I know it's only been 1 season, there were some characters who I felt like had some good development. I do feel like there were a good handful that we really didn't get much development at all from. Like I would say Bolin, Macho, as I call him.
Hannah has started referring to Mako as Macho. His name's just Macho now.
Yes, that's his new name. Like, I didn't feel like they really got much development there. They were more, to me, used as... Well, I mean, when they were doing the fire ferrets and, like, the bending...
The pro bending.
They had more of a involvement in the story. I felt like the later on we got, they were more just used as, like, pawns in the plot, like, to move the plot along and to create, like, the romantic...
The love triangle.
Love triangle in the case of Macho.
I'm mixed about the, like, clear divide in, like, story, because the first 6 episodes are, like, focused on this pro bending tournament, and you get all of that, and, you know, there's some Amon stuff going on, you know, on the side, and her, you know, training. But once we get to the end and that cuts off, then the story's just all about Amon. Yeah. And it's like, I don't think they made everything fit right with the characters, because I feel like Bolin really got underused.
The second half, he was barely there, except for, like, group sequences he was there, but that was about it. The other thing that bothered me a little bit, and it's done all the time with Asami, is that she's, like, such this interesting character. She, like, her dad ends up being a huge asshole. Yes. Like, basically being part of Amon's group and all this, and her mom had been killed by a firebender. Like, she's got a really compelling story, but she was just stuck in that love, like, the love triangle.
So, here's something that you might be interested in knowing. Originally, Asami was supposed to be evil. Okay. She was going to be an equalist, like an equal spy. Right. But they liked her so much that they just decided to make her a part of the cast. So originally she wasn't even going to be like a protagonist in the story. And I think maybe because of that, they didn't really have time to develop her as a character later on beyond, being a love interest, because she's so interesting.
Yeah.
Because, well, one, her fashion sense is amazing.
Yes.
She has the best outfits in the show. Two, she can fight.
Yeah.
She's a good fighter. She's clearly smart. She's capable. She's... her father's this huge industrialist, like, kind of Henry Ford figure.
Do you want to see, because so each character, I have a hard time, like, keeping track of characters, so I wrote a little description. For Asami, I wrote, all-around badass whose father is rich but a dick.
Yeah, that's about fair.
That's pretty much it.
She loses so much this season.
Yeah.
Her whole story is just, like, her father's evil. She has to move out of her house. Her boyfriend emotionally is cheating on her. And then she basically has to fight her own father at the end of the book, and it's like, I feel so bad for her.
Yeah, and I think going forward, I'd really like to see, like, some development with her, besides just being a love interest. Now that you told me that she was supposed to just be evil, I can see them just not having enough time to develop her character more. But I think that's interesting. It's always interesting to me, the characters who, like, are trying to break away or defy what their parents are.
Right.
And they're trying to, like, there's, like, an internal battle there. And there are times when you think she could be evil at the beginning. Like, I remember when they first showed her, I was like, oh, I don't know that I trust her. But I like seeing those characters who don't want to be like their family, and they kind of try to make their own path.
Gotta go their own way.
Gotta go your own way.
So Avatar was a children's show, but they presented very mature themes. And Korra, I think... everything feels so much darker.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the plot lines and the story elements, and not to say, like, the genocide of the Air Nation, and Ozai being, like, an abusive father, things like that aren't dark, but it just feels like the overall tone and, like, the way they're portraying the story feels a lot darker.
Even in the animation style, you notice, like, when they're in the
bloodbending.
Yeah, the bloodbending, and when they're in Republic City, it's so much darker, and it's obviously they're like it looks like there's smog there.
It feels very Dark Knight.
Yeah, but I mean, I think Avatar always had this element of hope, even when there was a lot of, like, negative and bad stuff going on. You always kind of felt this sense of hope, and I think a lot of it came from Aang. I think with Korra, she's a little bit older than Aang was, and I think it being 70 years in the future, I think that she always sort of has this sense that things could go really wrong. But I like having a little bit more of, like, a mature, like, darker storyline.
I do as well, and I don't want to give, I'm not going to give any spoilers for the future books, but I think as a whole, Korra does a great job in telling stories of themes that were not present in Avatar. They go in different directions, and in terms of characters, in terms of stories, that I think they maybe either couldn't do with Avatar, or they wanted, because the characters are a lot older, so they can do different things with that. So I will be interested to see what your thoughts are moving forward into the future books.
Yeah. So I just want to talk about the finale. The finale, now that you told me that this was supposed to be a miniseries, this was technically the end of the show, I guess I get it, but my biggest issue with the finale was the last, like, 5 to 10 minutes. There was so much happening.
It feels incredibly rushed.
Yeah, and I went back and watched it, like, 3 times, because I missed a bunch, and I was like, this is, like, the entire show summarized in 5 to 10 seconds. It was so much happening.
So I'll tell you, here's what I like. Pretty much half of it is just telling the backstory of Amon and Tarlok, or Noatak as he's known as. And I actually wrote down the music track that plays during that backstory is one of my favorite tracks from Legend of Korra. And I wrote down it's called Before, just because I wanted to get that name down, because it's so, like, somber and sad, and the way they use, like, the strings, to make that. And I really like that backstory and the way they tell that story of his past and how it shaped him to be who he is and why he wants equality because of this horrible father figure that he, it was his father, but horrible father he had growing up.
Yeah.
And And I really like that, but then once they confront him is where I just, like, it's just not right.
It was
just
also
doesn't feel right.
the worst plan. Like, they basically were going to call him out with no evidence in front of a group of people. And the thing that bothered me is it didn't feel characteristic of Korra to go about it like that.
Yeah.
And I just, after that point, when there was the confrontation between her and Amon, like, it was so quick, I didn't think that was executed well.
And then, I'm not opposed to her having her bending taken away. When I was watching it, I assumed that was going to happen. And I'm not even opposed to her getting airbending. What I don't necessarily like is how she gets her bending taken away, gets airbending. We see her go to the South Pole. Katara's like, I can't do anything. And then she immediately gets it back. Mm-hmm. And that I don't know if it's because it doesn't feel earned. Like, I don't feel like she earned that back. It just kind of feels like it was like, oh, hey, because this is a one season thing, we need to end on a high note. We can't end with her not having her powers or going into the Avatar state.
I almost feel, though, it would have been a lot more compelling to have just ended it not knowing. Even if the show had been a miniseries and had only gone on, I almost feel like it would have been more interesting just to see it end with her just having airbending.
And that's what I wish the creators would have known they had a second season.
So they could have left it a cliffhanger.
Because if they had a second season, if they knew that the show was going to keep going, they could have ended it like that. Yeah. We could have started season 2 with her learning airbending, getting down airbending, learning that, and then she could go through this discovery and this, journey to find her bending again or to get into the Avatar state. And I feel like that would have been a really compelling way to continue the show. Unfortunately, we didn't get that because it was just going to be a mini-series. And so I wish we could have seen that journey. Mm-hmm. I was disappointed kind of with the ending, I will say.
I was too. I mean, that's pretty much all I really have to say about it, the season. I want to save, like, my main summary of the season for at the end when we rank the seasons.
So I want to ask, how did you feel about... Did you think it was Aang when he walks up to her when she's sitting on the cliff?
Oh, yeah.
You thought it was Aang?
Well, okay. Because the whole season, Tenzin's kind of saying, like, oh, have you connected with the other avatars yet? Like, and I felt like they couldn't end the season without her actually connecting with them.
I agree.
So when she was sitting there and I saw someone walk up, I was like, okay, it's definitely going to be Aang. Mm-hmm. It's going to be her connecting. So that to me wasn't that surprising. I assumed that was him.
That's the other thing I wanted to mention. I knew there was something I was forgetting. I think, all things considered, The Legend of Korra did a really good job of integrating, like, old characters, but also not focusing too much on the past, because we got Aang in a limited capacity. We got that little flashback, which was, so nice to see even just a little bit of Sokka. Yeah. And like a little bit of an older Aang and Toph, and getting to see Aang going to the Avatar state as an adult with his giant air scooter. Yeah. And, I love that scene.
Yeah, I liked not having so much focus on them. Even Katara, she was only really in it for a couple scenes. Zuko, we don't even get anything on him, so we don't even really know where he's at.
We get his grandson.
Yeah, we do.
Named Iroh, which when I heard Iroh, I went, oh.
Yeah. No, but I like not having such a strong focus on them. It allows the new characters to get chance to develop.
And also we get them in the form of their children and grandchildren.
Right.
That representation.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to mention is there's this theory that Korra, when she's sitting on that crying, on the little ledge there, there's some people have this theory that she's contemplating suicide because now that she doesn't have her bending, she can't be the Avatar.
Because that was, like, all she was.
Because that was all she was, like, her identity rested on her bending and her abilities, like, fighting, and now that she doesn't have that anymore, she's, like, people theorize that she might have been considering dying so the next Avatar can be an Avatar kind of deal.
I guess the last thing is just that, so Tarlok just killed himself.
I can't believe I didn't mention that. We watched a murder-suicide on Nickelodeon. A children's show.
Well, because I was watching and I thought, Tenzin's just going to probably kill Amon right now. And then all of a sudden I saw it explode and I was like, oh wow, he just killed both of them.
I remember watching that and I was like, did this just air on a children's show? Yeah. We literally watched a man murder his brother in a murder-suicide on a boat. Yeah, that was unexpected. Mm-hmm. And that's what I mean in the terms of, like, dealing with more mature themes, is I can't even believe I forgot about that. Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, because I kind of did the thing where I just, like, sat there for a minute, and I was like, wait, that's why I had to go back and rewatch, because I was like, maybe I saw that wrong, but yeah, there was a lot going on. We're going to get into some of our favorite moments, favorite things from the episode, so let's start out with your favorite episode.
Okay, so, I was debating between 2 episodes, and we kind of briefly discussed this while we were watching it, but I ended up picking episode 8, When Extremes Meet.
That was also mine.
Okay, I kind of thought it might be. We try to not talk about things too specific, so we have stuff to talk about when we record these, but I just think the build-up and the tension in this episode and the humor is really good in this episode. I just think as a whole it is the best representation of this show, because her and Tarlok are the same in a way, because they have that talk in his office and he's like, you're using, violence, to intimidate people, and he's like, isn't that what you came here to do?
Right.
Like, to oppress and intimidate me, and it's like, that's exactly what she was here for. So I just thought the fighting was good in the episode. Like, her versus Tarlok was a really good fight scene. The finding out he's a bloodbender is a great end to the episode, and also how it relates to today.
Right. Yeah, for me, it was the first, 5 minutes, the humor was just so good. I instantly was like, okay, this reminds me of, old Avatar. This was also the first episode, I think, where I finally got invested in the show. This is the first time we got to see, a group of characters kind of team up with each other. And so that made me, think, I don't know, I just enjoyed that aspect. So that, to me, and like you said, the fight at the end, the moment between them, I thought was just really good. So, I mean, there was a couple of the other episodes that I really enjoyed as well, but this was the first one where I really got invested.
I think, this is something that I mentioned to you, the block of 7, 8, and 9 as episodes, I think is the best chunk of episodes in the season. Mm-hmm. Episode 7 being where you find out Hiroshi's a member of the Equalists, and you have to fight, them, and then 9 being the flashback with, Aang and, Yakone and that backstory.
Yeah. I would just like to go into the favorite fight then, because mine was actually the fight with Korra and Tarlok at the end there.
Okay, that was maybe a second or a third choice. I was going between a couple.
The reason I really like that one is because, like you said, there was that moment right before with them where they kind of, where you realize, they are doing the same thing. One of the things, though, I really liked is all, the small details. They had a lot of, Tarlok was doing water bending, and he would, cut, just a little bit of her hair, stuff like that. And also, realizing that he's a bloodbender, that moment, and you're like, oh. Because I remember I was like, oh my god, bloodbending, he's doing it. So, yeah, that was my favorite fight.
It was a strong contender for me. I had a few that I was kind of struggling to pick between. I also loved seeing Aang fight as an adult, but I felt like I couldn't pick that because it wasn't, one of the main cast members. I ended up picking the fight from episode 6, The Winner Is, with Korra and Lin.
Okay.
Mainly because watching Lin fight is so great.
She was my, overall, watching the season, she was the person I looked most forward to watching fight, was Lin.
So the reason I picked episode 6 is because we hadn't seen Lin in action at this point. So to see her, Korra, does that water trick where you get up in the air, she's falling, Lin grabs her, and then you watch Lin Spider-Manning, around the building. And then, specifically, what I like is the fight between the general, with the mustache, and Korra on the roof, where they're going back and forth, and it's, really quick, and, the music is great in that scene.
Right.
And just, the tension, where Lin has to decide between, am I going after Amon, or am I going to save Korra, because, they were not seeing eye to eye at that point.
Right.
And I just think the culmination of that worked really well.
So, favorite scene? Mine was the background story with Tarlok and Amon.
Okay.
Like you said, that song was my favorite. I went on YouTube and found it right after the episode and saved it. But there was just something about how they mixed the music in with that story, and for the first time you kind of see how Amon could have become the person he became, what his motives were, and and having that sort of childhood, that sort of growing up, like, you can almost sympathize a little bit with him. So I like that moment, getting, like, sort of that human moment, even with Tarlok, too. Like, you can sympathize with both the villains of the season. That was my favorite.
The one I ended up choosing is from near the beginning of the show, actually. It's when Korra breaks down with Tenzin. Mm-hmm. It's from right after, I guess the whole scene would be where, you know, she's on Avatar. She's just challenged Amon. You know, she's on Avatar Aang Memorial Island. She gets roped in. Amon's like, it's not time yet. He's like, I could take away your bending right now. And, you know, the whole episode we've been building up this fear. You know, it starts with a nightmare where she has to face Amon. And it's this build-up where, you know, she doesn't want to join Tarlok's task force. And then, you know, challenges him because she has so much fear. And then after he, you know, knocks her out, she sees this Aang flashback. And then Tenzin's there and she just breaks down. Yeah. Because we've seen her be strong and we hadn't seen her be vulnerable at that point, and she's just like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm lost, I'm confused, you know, I'm terrified, and like Tenzin's just like there for her, and there's that good like mentor, you know, mentee relationship that I thought was really nice to see. Yeah. At that point in the show.
That actually lines up, well, not the same episode, but I did have a favorite quote.
I did too.
So I think it's the finale, and it's when Korra is, it might have been when she was sitting on that cliff area, and Aang comes as like a spirit or like the Avatar.
I'm kind of thinking we have the same favorite quote.
Yeah, and so when we hit our lowest point, we are open to the greatest change.
That's exactly the same quote I picked.
I got goosebumps when I heard that.
Me too.
And I was like, it's such a Aang like thing to say, like the exact perfect thing to say in that moment, and it just like had so much truth. I just was like, okay, like, yeah, I can relate.
I also really like that quote because it just like, again with the finale, I don't necessarily know if it feels earned that she just gets her bending back and then can go into the Avatar state, but clearly she's broken because, you know, I mean, Mako's like, I love you, and she's like, I can't do that, you know, I lost my bending, and I mean, I'm not happy that they kissed at the end of the show either. I didn't think that was necessary.
Not thrilled about that.
I wasn't thrilled about that to be at that time, but just the weight of it, and just also just seeing him again and him being there, you know, and them connecting, I just thought that was a really good quote to fit that scene.
Yeah. Okay, so we each picked our top 3 favorite characters.
Yes, for the season.
So let's...
The book. Oh my god, we both keep doing that. I keep telling you book and then I say season.
So let's just go back and forth.
Okay.
So my number 1 favorite character...
to put him in order?
Well, like, I just put them in an order, but...
Okay. I mean, I can just read them in the order I wrote them in.
And it was actually the biggest surprise for me would have been Lin.
My first one I wrote was Lin Beifong. Yeah.
So, when she first starts out, like, I wasn't the biggest fan of her. And I don't think you're supposed to be.
No.
But watching her fight and just watching, like, at the end, she basically is willing to sacrifice herself.
For her ex.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But still, just, like, getting to watch her and getting to, like, be like, that's what we could have seen with Toph. Like, getting to see the metal bend, and, you know, Toph taught her that. It's just, it's so cool to see.
Well, I love her because when we start out, she's the chief of police. She holds this high power. She's this kind of stern, like, old, you know, that stern older woman trope that's, you know, you see a lot. But then she also is fighting, and she clearly is on the Avatar side, and then she is like, I'm going to do it my way outside the law, you know, and drops to the police force and, you know, does whatever she wants to do to get to the truth.
Basically becomes like a vigilante.
She becomes Batman.
Yeah. She goes from Spider-Lin to Batman.
To Batlin. Yeah. And it's great, and I love to see it. Yeah. And just, like, and then knowing she got her powers back, got her bending back, is great, too.
Yeah, because like I said, she was my favorite person to watch fight. Like, I always get excited when I saw her fight. Second, I would have to go with Tenzin.
I also wrote Tenzin second, so...
He just brought this sort of, like, calmness and this wisdom to the show, and you felt like there was a piece of Aang there, obviously. But... in terms of being, like, a mentor, and in terms of being, like, a person who always had Korra's back, even when he wasn't thrilled, like, with the bending, like, the pro bending, he wasn't happy about that, but he ended up, like, at one point, he's, like, cheering for her, like...
He's stubborn.
Yeah.
You know, because they don't always see eye to eye, him and Korra, and he's, like, clearly only respond to force. He's like, you're not doing it my way, like, you needed to be doing it my way, but then they're able to come to terms and to seemingly work well together, you know, towards the end of the show. They have, like, a good mentor, you know, relationship going on, master, you know.
So this felt weird not to include Korra,
Okay, I also didn't include Korra.
Because here's what I'll just say before I reveal my third character. It feels weird not to include the main character of the show.
So, I don't want to say anything because I've seen the show.
Yeah.
Korra is a character who experiences a lot of growth.
Yeah.
I mean, I can imagine you would expect a main character to see a lot of growth. And it's different from Aang, where Aang's growth was a lot different than Korra's. Like, clearly he had wisdom beyond his ears. You know, he was fun, he was playful, but he also understood, you know, and came into his role as the Avatar. Right. And Korra is brash. You know, she's, you know, we've already talked about her character, and she does learn throughout the book. She, you know, becomes a better like, Avatar and a better person, but I don't think, at least in my mind, in book 1, I don't think it's there. Yeah. I like Korra. I just, I don't think she's there as, like, a favorite.
I would agree. Okay, so I ended up going with Asami.
I went with Asami, too.
Okay, so we had the same 3. I think, to me, Asami had the most compelling storyline the whole season.
In rewatching book 1, because I probably haven't watched book 1 in a while, probably maybe 2 or 3 years, like, the whole thing in order, and I really like Asami's story, and even though she doesn't necessarily get a lot to work with in terms of, like, you know, character growth and plot, you know, what's there is really well done.
Yeah. And she can fight. I like her attitude. I like that she just doesn't really...
Sense of style.
Yeah. And I don't know, we already talked about her quite a bit, but... Yeah, she was definitely, like, for me, another surprise character.
I agree. So, there's one thing I wanted to discuss before we finish with our book 1 discussion. So, Avatar, we had books Water, Earth, and Fire, and Korra book 1 is Air. Mm-hmm. So, what do you think we're going to see for book 2 as a title?
That's where it's interesting because...
Do you want me to tell you what the title is? Okay.
And I don't think they're going to go back to the other elements.
Okay.
With her, though, it's like Aang started out not having mastered 3 of the elements. With her, she had only not mastered 1. I feel like going forward, now that she has all of her powers back, I don't know what it will be called, but I imagine it will just be a combination of all the... I don't know what I'm trying to say.
So... okay, so you mentioned earlier that you want to see them going to other locations. Mm-hmm. So mainly what I wanted to ask is, like, where does our story go from here? Because now we've got a 14 episode book that extends upon technically a complete mini series. So it doesn't, you know, do you think it's going to lend from the first book? Like, are we going to see, you know, a connection from, like, things with Amon and the Equalist? Are we going to go a completely different route? Like, would you like to see, or, like, what do you think we'll see?
I mean, I think with the way they ended Amon's story, to me it was pretty clear that, like, they were ending that storyline.
Okay.
I would say, though, that I think with any sort of political or, like, belief like that, it obviously just doesn't disappear. I imagine there still might be people who feel that everyone should be equal and still have an issue with Korra and, like, all the different kinds of benders. But I don't think that will be a major story plot. I don't know that they keep in Republic City.
Okay.
I think maybe they go to some of the other, like, could maybe go to Water Tribes, or maybe go to... We haven't seen a lot with, like, the Fire Bending, Fire Nation area, and I know there's not really, like, separate... Like, a lot of places now it's more combined.
I will say that the nations themselves are still pretty individualistic, like we saw in Avatar, where you've got the distinct, you know, southern versus northern water tribe, the air nation, you know, the air nation, the earth kingdom, fire nation. And Republic City is really that multicultural, like,
that's like the
infusion.
That's like the city where they're all kind of combined.
It's kind of like a melting pot, the American melting pot, as you might say. Like, well, you know, like New York, where, like, there's so many different cultures and, you know, people from different countries and different, you know, traditions and things that all just kind of mold together. Not like, you know, you don't understand what I'm trying to say. Though.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really know. I like I said, going forward, I want to see some of the side characters get some more development, get some more plot. I'd like to see Korra get more growth, more of a character. I didn't necessarily feel like she had a ton of development, maybe until towards like the end. And I know it's only been one season or one book. It's gonna be an issue. I'll get it down.
We'll get there eventually. I'll keep doing it.
But yeah, I'd like to see some more growth. I'd maybe like to see 1 or 2 new characters introduced. But I mean, for the most part, I don't know. I don't really know what to expect going forward, I guess. So I don't know. I'm just looking forward to book 2.
Same.
And see what happens.
And we will be back when we have finished book 2.
We would like to thank Joseph McDade for our intro music. He provides free music available for all kinds of creative use. The song that we used is called Sunrise Expedition, and you can find it and his other music on his website, josephmcdade.com. If you would like to reach us, you can email us at r3podcasts@gmail.com. That's R, the number 3, podcasts@gmail.com. Or you can find us on Instagram by searching Research Rank Repeat.